Hi, this is Gail with Beaded Jewelry Diva, and today we are going to do Chainmail 102. This is going to be talking about the various weaves and chainmail jewelry. And if you haven't seen my Chainmail 101 course, I suggest you go ahead and take a look at that video, because that's where we cover things like wire gauges, aspect ratio, pliers, etc., etc., etc. And this one we talk about the various weaves and how what we talked about in 101 relates to what you see in the jewelry. So if you enjoy this video, give it a thumbs up, by the way, and let's start talking about these various weaves. All right, first I want to show you a little bit more about aspect ratio that we discussed previously and why it makes a difference. Here are three different aspect ratios of the same weave. This weave is called the inverted round maille, and even though that these are different gauges, the aspect ratios are also different on these, and it makes a difference. For example, this one is almost impossible to bend. It is not flexible at all. It is done with an aspect ratio of about 3.5 or 3.6, and it's like way too tight. So I call this the Papa Bear style. Now we have the Mama Bear style. This is done with an AR of 4.1, and it's very nice, but when you put it down you can see it kind of loses its pattern just a little bit. It flattens out some. Now you still have a nice pattern, but it's not as it's not like it really should be at the 4.1. It's just a little too loose. Mama Bear and Baby Bear, which is just right. Oops, let's get that guy out of the way. Baby Bear, just right. So it's still nice and flexible, makes a great bracelet or necklace, but when you put it down, it keeps its wonderful rope shape. This is an AR of about 3.8, 3.9, so it's a little bit bigger than this one. It's a little bit smaller than this one as far as aspect ratio. But you can see how aspect ratio makes a big difference, whether something is really tight and it doesn't have much flexibility, whether it can lose its shape when you put it down, or whether it's just right. Okay, aspect ratio aside, let's go ahead and talk about some of the weaves themselves. All right, here are three weaves that are closely related, believe it or not. Now this one I did in 16 gauge, and the rest I've done in 18 gauge, but they're really based on the same weave. Now this one is the Byzantine, which is, it looks a little complicated, but it's actually one of the easier chainmail to start out with. A lot of people start out with this one, and once you get it, it's like, it's amazing, and it lends itself to a lot of other different styles. This one, it's related to it, is the box chain, and it's called a box because as you can see, it's very square. It's not round like the Byzantine, but it's very closely related. Now we're going to talk about the inverted round maille, which is very closely related to both of these two and to this one. So the inverted round maille has like a honeycomb appearance. And this is very closely related to the round maille. So this is the standard round maille. And this is the inverted round maille. So these four weaves are all very closely related. But as you can see, just putting them together a little differently, and they all, they have a slightly different aspect ratio, you can see how taking one weave can give you many, many different looks. Okay, here are some of those. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other weaves. Okay, these two are called the European 4-in-1 and the European 6-in-1. And the reason they're called that is because in this one, every ring goes through 4 other rings, and in this one, every ring goes through 6 other rings. Now, I'm going to have a video on this very, very shortly, teaching you how to make this bracelet, as a matter of fact. So look for that, but meanwhile, these two are very closely related. They're constructed the same way, or basically the same way. It's just a difference of the number of rings that go through each other ring. So European 4-in-1, this is one of the real basic weaves that you can learn, and a lot of people start out with this one. And then the 6-in-1 is a little bit more difficult, but it's okay too, and it's not that difficult actually. So these two are related. Well, let's talk about some of the other kinds of weaves, because up to this point we've been using all the rings are the same size. Let's talk about some rings or some chainmail patterns where the rings are different sizes. Here are some weaves that use different size jump rings. Now these are all related to the parallel or helm weave. And as you can see, we have large rings and then we have smaller jump rings. And that's the case for all of these. This one is called Celtic Visions. This one I call Hugs and Kisses. I'm not sure if I came up with this particular design, but I hadn't seen it anywhere else, so I'm going to claim it for the time being. And then this one is another version of the helm chain. And as you can see, again, they use two different kinds of jump rings in order to create these designs. So let's talk now about the types of metals you can use for your jump rings. Okay, now we are going to talk about the different kinds of metals in jump rings. The most popular jump rings that you will see are going to be copper. You will see sterling silver, and you will see something called enamel plated copper. You might also see, not enamel plated, but enamel coated copper. And you might also see some base metal jump rings with like silver plating or whatever. I usually stay away from the plated ones. For the most part, I go through the enameled copper, the sterling silver, or the copper. I've recently started playing with aluminum and anodized aluminum. Haven't done a whole lot with these yet, but I'm experimenting. Now let me talk about something with copper, just plain old copper. As you can see, I have one of these which is very bright and another one that I have oxidized. And I tell you what, I dropped both of these in some liver of sulfur to oxidize them. You can see how I have a nice rich patina on this one, and this one does nothing. Turns out these jump rings were coated jump rings, so coated copper. They have like a clear coating on them, non-tarnish. So if you ever want to do some oxidation, you just make sure you know what kind of copper jump rings you're looking at. So as you can see, like I said, this one is very nicely patinaed, and this one is bright, 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 bright. Speaking of patina, let's see if I can get that back in focus. This is some sterling silver that I have patinaed, and you can see that there are kind of rainbow colors in it. Let's see if I can get that in focus just a little bit more. But you can see there are rainbow colors. Now it's very possible to get these kind of neat colors out of sterling silver when you oxidize them. So one of these days I will talk about how to oxidize sterling silver to get some of these colors, but just keep in mind that you can do that. You can oxidize copper and sterling silver very easily. You can also oxidize brass or bronze, as I like to say it. It's usually what they say is red brass is bronze. You cannot oxidize something like aluminum, and you also don't even want to try to oxidize anything that is an enameled copper. But if you want to just go with something that has a neat patina on it, go with non-coated copper or sterling silver. Now obviously when it comes to these wonderful enameled coppers, you can get all sorts of colors. I mean, I have a multitude in all sorts of shapes and sizes, but keep in mind that you can get all sorts of wonderful colors here. You can also get some colors in what they call anodized aluminum. I just got some anodized aluminum, so I'm not sure how well the anodized coating takes. I'll play with it and see what it's like. Just keep in mind something when it comes to the enameled copper. When you see an 18 gauge enameled copper, it is 18 gauge before it is enameled. That makes a difference because the enameling will add just a smidgen, granted, but it's going to add a smidgen to the inside diameter or the wire diameter, I should say. So your AR is going to be very, very slightly smaller. Now, when it comes to some of the larger aspect ratios, it's not going to matter all that much. But if you have something that is a very, very tight ratio, like a Yentz pinned weave, using enameled copper might make a difference on whether you can successfully do that weave. So just keep that in mind, that if you have a very small aspect ratio, anything below like a 3.5, just be careful. I might actually go with sterling silver or regular copper instead of the enameled copper. Other metals. There are other metals that you can work with. Some of them include like niobium, titanium, stainless steel. Just keep in mind with stainless steel, when you open and close the jump ring, stainless steel is very difficult to open and close. Titanium, I know, is pretty difficult to open and close. Haven't tried either one of those. I have tried niobium, and that seems to be online with pretty much sterling silver. Fine silver, yes, you can do fine silver jump rings. Just keep in mind that they're very, very soft. So they're easy to warp out of position. That way you want to work with thicker jump rings with a smaller aspect ratio. One more thing to talk about gauge is you can tell that gauge affects the size of the jewelry, obviously the width of it, but it also affects the effect. As you can see here, I've got some 14 gauge jump rings, some 16, some 18, and some 20. I've actually used the same number of ring connections. There are 19 in each one of these, and you can tell that this is a whole lot smaller than this. So if I wanted to create a bracelet of this, I wouldn't need nearly as many jump rings, and it would be for a very, very chunky appearance. This is great for chunky bracelets, chunky necklaces. If you want to make a statement, this is a good size to use. 16 gauge, this makes a nice statement if you're bigger like me, a big gal. If you don't prefer anything that's quite as chunky, then you may want to come down to an 18 gauge. 18 gauge is wonderful to work with. It's pretty sturdy. I wish I had done this in a lighter color, but it's pretty sturdy. It's fairly easy to work with. It's not going to warp very easily. And I like working with 18 gauge. It's what I use most often for my jewelry. When it comes to earrings, though, I tend to like 20 gauge. Now, this is wonderful if someone is very petite. You could have a very petite bracelet, or if you just like petite bracelets. This makes great. It's also great for earrings because they're light. And it's a very lovely look, very, very dainty. So as you can see, the size of the jump rings, or rather the gauge of the jump rings, is going to make a big difference with your jewelry. So again, when you're deciding on your pattern and your weave, just think about what effect you want and who you're making it for. If you're making it for a guy, you might want to go for 14, 16 gauge. If you're making it for a lady, probably anything goes. Certainly it is for me. So keep the effect in mind when you're choosing your ring size. Also, just keep in mind that a 20 gauge ring, it's a lot easier to warp them when you're opening and closing them. That's another reason that I tend to stay away from 20 gauge, and I usually go with 18 gauge. All right, so we have talked about different kinds of weaves. We have talked about what weaves are kind of related to each other. I hope that you found this fun and instructional, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well as with the Chainmail 101. I will go ahead and put a link down to my website where I have the free tutorials, and then I have some tutorials on how to create some of these jewelry patterns. Look for this one again because I'm going to be doing a video on this one very shortly, so you'll be able to make this bracelet. And I hope you have very much enjoyed it. Give it a thumbs up if you have. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel yet, I hope you'll do so. And this is Gail signing out, saying have yourself a great day. Bye.